right? I mean, come on. How hard? It's not that hard to teach people, and frankly, it's a really good skill to
Yeah,
have.
and
So
it's a fallback. This kind of ties in with where my brain was going with the libertarianism and the off grid living, and it's all fine and dandy to have a fridge that keeps your food from going bad, but it's always nice to have a backup plan, right? This is something I learned in the kitchens. You gotta have a backup. And if you're really clever, you've got a backup for your backup.
right,
You've got your setup on the line. You've got one backup of tomatoes that are cut, but where the tomatoes are. You know what I mean. You know how long it takes to slice tomatoes, how many tomatoes you go through, and that's how I was kind of putting together a brainstorm of the off grid plan. And a root cellar sounds like it's going to be it's one of those things. It's like better to need it and not have better to have it and not need it
and not
than to need it and not have it. And yeah, like what if the internet goes down tomorrow, right? We got to switch everything back to paper and a pen.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's so many things like that. It's like the argument that people say, well, who needs a firearm? Well, I can tell you right now, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation if I hadn't owned one.
Right.
I think you know
I think I
my
know the
bear
story.
story, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it just happened to be that I happened to be carrying a rifle the day that I was charged by a bear that was totally serious about it.
Oh wow.
And
I don't know if I've heard this story. I thought you were referring to the one involving a ranger.
No, 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 no.
Okay.
No, I was. I'll tell you the more in-depth story another day, Simon, because I'm not sure I want you to record all of this one. But but the long and short of it was that it became really obvious this bear was coming, and I didn't, all the posturing and everything wasn't going to make any difference, and he charged, and I happened to have a bear tag because at the time I was, I would stick one in the freezer every so often if I got the chance. So nothing went to waste. We ate him, but I shot this bear at a full charge. I got very lucky. I hit him right smack in the head.
Oh my goodness!
And it was an enormous bear, absolutely enormous bear, and so big, and he was cinnamon colored that I had to question whether I shot a grizzly or not. And I was like, well, too bad, so sad if I did, because it was me or him.
Right.
And but it was a black bear. But put it this way, I don't know what you know about deboning a carcass, but I cut all the big muscle off, so the backstrap, the hind and front quarters, and the tenderloin, and deboned. I had 350 pounds of meat.
Oh wow, that is a lot.
Yeah, so you take you add all the bone and the head and the hide and the guts to that, and we're talking an 900 pound bear.
Wowzers. Yeah.
So, yeah,
better to be looking at it than looking for it.
Right, exactly, and we ended up getting that hide tan. We gave it away as a gift. It covered a queen size bed.
Wow.
And the taxidermist that did the curing of the hide, he had boiled all the meat off the skull because he was so fascinated by the shot and all the rest of it. But and he told us, he said, look, man, he said, that bear was probably 12 to 15 years of age. He said, it's like the 50-year-old guy who still goes to the gym for 2 hours every day and is an absolute monster.
Oh my goodness.
And, just terrifies everybody, right? Like he's that guy. And he goes, that wasn't a bluff charge. He goes, at the very least, he was going to give you a beating that you would never have, recovered from.
Right.
So when I saw the movie The Revenant, I absolutely shuddered because that scene of the bear mauling him, like that, I was less than a second away from that.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway,
yeah.
Goes to
so
that
that's that goes to that ties into the sovereignty issue as well, and what's what am I looking for here? What am I trying to say? When you
I don't know
outsourcing. Outsourcing. You're not going. The park ranger's not going to get there in time with his gun, right? If you depend on the system for everything, right? You got to take things into your own hands.
No, and that's part of living rural. I mean, and frankly, living in the city. I've called when I lived in the city. We had an issue one day where I was really worried these guys were going to burn down our community. And there was a whole bunch of them. They were drunk. They were firing off firecrackers. It was so dry. Like there was, and it was one of those things where you don't want to walk in, right? Because it's me and then 8 guys or whatever, right? And I don't want to take on 8 drunken guys.
Yeah.
I called the police and said, look, this needs to shut down now or we're gonna have big problems. It took them an hour and 45 minutes to get there.
Mm-hmm.
An hour and 45 minutes. That's garbage, right? I would have been far better off to go grab half a dozen of my neighbors and go, let's just go kick some ass.
Yeah.
And we'll deal with the fallout, right? But let's shut this down before these guys burn down the community. So, and when you live rural, calling the police, they can't even find my place.
Yeah.
They honestly can't find it because they have tried. And I watched them. We were on fire watch and we were supposed to all evacuate. I heard the order had gone out and they were going door to door. The police were telling people they had to go. They missed our place altogether.
Wow.
So, and it's not because the police are incompetent. I'm not hacking on the police. They don't have the resources. There aren't enough of them.
Yeah.
And I'm not advocating for more police. We don't need a police state. In fact, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole on this one because I was thinking about this earlier.
Okay. On that note, hold that rabbit hole for 2 minutes. I'm going to go take a washroom break real quick.
Sure.
And we're back. So we don't want a police state. Where are we going from there? Where's the rabbit hole?
Okay, so there's a number of parts to it, and we started with it before we got to saying I didn't want a police state. It was because I was saying I don't expect us to get more police. I don't think more police is the answer to not being able to get an officer when you call. But I'm going to tell you a little story. So in 2009, I think it was 2008, 2009, somewhere in there, I went down to Columbus, Ohio. And you remember in 2008, there was a massive housing crash.
Yep.
And that caused stock market problems. And it caused all sorts of economic issues. And the city of Columbus basically ran out of money, couldn't pay the cops. And so the police went on strike. They didn't go to work. And I went down to, I'd hopped in a cab to go where I needed to go. And it was the cabbie that was telling me about this. And I said, oh, that's interesting. He goes, here, I'll drive you right by the main downtown station. There's this huge compound. And it was locked up tight. And you can see it was just full of cars, like full of cop cars.
Yeah.
And I said, so there's no rioting in the streets. There's nothing. He said, no, the crime has gone down.
And what's your hypothesis for why that was the outcome?
Well, it's interesting. It's because my question is this: how much of crime is crime? That's one question, right? I mean, we see videos constantly of officers that probably should have never been officers escalating situations, and for all intents and purposes, taking something that is, even if it's, I wouldn't say it's even a misunderstanding, and escalating it into an actual incident. Mm-hmm. And then we have all of the drug use crimes, which are like, well, those are people with problems that need help. Mm-hmm. The drug dealer side of it, sure, I would say you take your meth dealers and you hang them out in the street with signs that say, I was once a meth dealer, now I'm a dead meth dealer, or whatever. I'm good with that stuff. But at the same time, it always makes me wonder. So now I'm going to tell you a second story. We'll tie the two together and see if they make any sense.
Yeah.
A number of years before that, I think it was maybe mid-90s, I went to Australia and we traveled by dirt bike, bought an old dirt bike, clapped out dirt bike, and we traveled down the east coast of Australia. Fantastic. Another massive off-grid experience, a tent and camp wherever we could. And it was fantastic. And we met a couple that was, for all intents and purposes, like looking at ourselves, except they were Australian. And we went to visit them. And he had been a police officer one time in the Victoria State Police. And he had joined because he had the idealistic thoughts of to serve and protect. That's why he joined. Mm-hmm. He'd heard rumors that the police were corrupt. And when he actually passed, his tests and got into the academy, he found out that not only were they corrupt, but they were the source of most of the crime,
Right.
and they did their crime while on duty. And he refused to participate, and so he was bullied and harassed to the point where he finally quit.
Right.
And when I say bullied, I mean like beat up. His car was trashed. He was threatened. His life was threatened. That kind of stuff because he
Yeah.
wouldn't participate in the crime.
Right.
And shortly after he had left the police force, the Victoria State Police decided to do an internal sting investigation, and they literally gutted their police force. Like something like 80% of their police force got fired, and they ended up slowly rebuilding it. And crime in Victoria went way down,
Mm-hmm.
way down. Huge percentage of the armed robberies and stuff was being done by cops.
Wow.
You know,
So
and
are we talking like an off-duty cop who just gets a blind eye turned, or are we
no, I'm
talking?
talking about on-duty cops, actually done by the police.
Yeah, just your
So,
regular old corruption.
yeah, this gentleman told us that his very first night on the job in the state of Victoria, they sent him out with two senior officers, basically to initiate it.
Right.
Um, and so he said they got a call from dispatch while they were out cruising around saying there had been a break-in at a liquor store. And so, it was late at night, late at night. So they whipped over to the liquor store, and there was no sign of anything in front of the liquor store. And so the two older cops said, run around the back and secure the back. So this fellow's name was Mike. And Michael ran around the back to secure the back, and there was nothing going on in the back. So he came back around the front. And when he got to the front of the liquor store, the officers, the two senior officers, had smashed the front window and were loading the cruiser with booze.
Oh my God.
And he was like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah.
And they just looked at him and they said, you heard the call. It came in from dispatch.
Oh wow.
There was a break-in here.
Wow.
So in other words,
this is before CCTV, is presumably.
Absolutely. So, I imagine that has a lot to do with it. Maybe changes because people are held to account a little higher.
Mm-hmm.
But my whole point of it being is, because we started with, we don't want to go have a police state, is that more police is not the answer to making crime change. That's a whole nother topic of changing the way that we deal with criminal activity, and what onus falls on the homeowner. There's a guy who was been charged recently. 5 armed men, armed with guns, came into his house.
Mm-hmm.
This is in Ontario, and this guy lives with his mom, and he fought back, and he ended up shooting one of the guys.
Yeah,
and he's been charged with
mm-hmm.
murder
Mm-hmm.
in his own home, having been attacked by 5 armed guys.
Jeez.
Right? It was
Yeah.
craziness.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the libertarian part of me just goes, well, that's nuts. You break into my house with a firearm, I should be able to drop you. And basically, they should come over and go, thank you very much for taking off the trash.
Is this a recent development? Has he been sentenced, or has he argued self-defense, or what?
Yeah, he hasn't been tried yet, but he's been charged.
Right.
He's been arrested and charged. Wow. And this is in Ontario. It's fairly recent. Yeah.
Yeah. That is interesting. As far as the cops, I used to date a girl, and her father, this was in Regina, and her father was one of the RCMP trainers down at the RCMP barracks there. And interesting fella. He was the guy who, you have to get pepper sprayed and maced in order to be able to be licensed to use it. You got to know what you're doing to people, right? And this guy, her father was that guy who would pepper spray and mace people and get paid for it, kind of thing. But him and his wife were kind of giving me the lowdown on what this policing force is like, and the type of people that go into it, right? And they say there's 2 kinds of people. Yeah. You got your type A's and your type B's. And the type B's are the people like you and I, the people who sit back and watch things develop and try to figure it out. But the type A's, I don't know, it's fascinating the way they described it. His wife, he goes, these type A's, and his wife just goes, up, grunt, sniff. That's how they describe the type A's. Up, grunt, sniff. So
Yeah.
essentially, just an animalistic response.